The third planet burned like a dying star against the black of space. Commander Wraith watched the orbital bombardment through the reinforced windows of his war room, feeling nothing but satisfaction. Another human colony reduced to ash and molten glass, another victory for the Dominion fleet. Wraith belonged to the Vorth, a species that had spent 1,000 years perfecting the art of conquest. His gray skin bore the ritual scars of 17 successful campaigns, each mark representing a fallen civilization. The humans would be his 18th victory and by far the easiest. These creatures called humans had only discovered space travel 200 years ago. Their ships used primitive chemical rockets. Their weapons fired metal slugs instead of plasma beams. Their armor was made of simple steel alloys, while Vorth warriors wore quantum-hardened battlesuits. The War Council had predicted total victory within 4 months. So far, they had been correct. The door to the war room slid open with a soft hiss. 2 Vorth guards entered, dragging a human between them. The prisoner wore the torn remains of a blue uniform, and blood trickled from a cut above his left eye. Despite his injuries, he stood straight when the guards released him. Admiral Kane of the Human Colonial Defense Force, the prisoner said, giving his name and rank without being asked. Wraith studied the human with interest. Kane appeared to be middle-aged by human standards, with gray hair and weathered features. His eyes were brown and surprisingly calm for someone whose homeworld had just been destroyed. "I am Commander Wraith of the Dominion Fleet," Wraith replied in heavily accented English. The Vorth had learned human languages from captured data transmissions. "You are now a prisoner of war." Kane nodded slowly. "I understand." "Good. Then you will cooperate with our interrogation. We require the location of Earth's primary defense installations." The human admiral smiled, and something about that expression made Wraith uncomfortable. It was not the desperate grin of a broken man hoping for mercy. It was something else entirely. "You really don't understand what you've started, do you?" Kane said. Wraith's 3-fingered hand moved to the plasma pistol at his belt. "Explain yourself." "The colony you just destroyed," Kane continued, "New Boston. Population 200,000. Mostly farmers, engineers, teachers, people who had never hurt anyone in their lives. Acceptable casualties of war," Wraith replied. "Your resistance ends the moment you surrender Earth's coordinates." Kane laughed, a sound that held no humor. "Commander, has anyone ever told you about human history? We know enough. A young species barely evolved beyond savagery. Young, yes. Savage." Kane paused, considering the word. "That depends on your perspective. We've been fighting wars for 5,000 years. We've fought with sticks and stones, with swords and shields, with guns and bombs. We've fought in forests and deserts, on mountains and plains, in the air and under the sea. And now we fight among the stars." Wraith felt a flicker of annoyance. The human was stalling, trying to delay the inevitable. "Your primitive experience means nothing against Dominion technology." Technology. Kane repeated the word thoughtfully. "Yes, your ships are impressive. Your weapons are powerful. But tell me something, Commander. In all those 17 civilizations you conquered, did any of them ever fight back the way we have?" The question caught Wraith off guard. He thought of the Zilani, whose surrender came after a single demonstration of Dominion firepower. The Korthak, who negotiated terms after losing their homeworld's moon. The Yanari, who simply fled to the outer rim rather than resist. They were wise enough to recognize superior force, Wraith said finally. Or maybe they just didn't know how to fight a real war. Before Wraith could respond, his communication device chimed. A message from Fleet Captain Voss appeared on the small screen. 3 human cargo ships had been detected in the Ross system, apparently fleeing toward the outer colonies. "A simple matter for the pursuit squadron, you see?" Wraith showed Kane the message. "More of your people running. Soon there will be no one left to save." Kane read the message and shook his head. "Commander, do you know what those cargo ships are carrying?" "Supplies, equipment, the usual resources of a failing military. Agricultural explosives, mining charges, industrial chemicals. Enough concentrated energy to power a small city or..." Kane's smile returned. "To turn a cargo ship into a very large bomb." Wraith stared at the human. "You're suggesting your people would destroy their own vessels." "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm telling you exactly what's going to happen. Those ships are going to wait until your pursuit squadron gets close. Then they're going to detonate everything they're carrying. The blast won't destroy your ships, but it will damage them enough to make them easy targets for the defense platforms hiding in the asteroid belt." The communication device chimed again. This time it was an emergency signal from the pursuit squadron leader. Wraith activated the audio with trembling fingers. "Command, this is Squadron Leader Tarn. We are under attack. The cargo ships, they exploded." "Repeat, the humans destroyed their own vessels. We have multiple hull breaches and incoming fire from unknown contacts." The transmission dissolved into static. Kane watched Wraith's reaction with those calm brown eyes. "You thought this would be like your other conquests. Show up with superior firepower, demand surrender, celebrate victory, but you picked the wrong species this time." "A few damaged ships mean nothing," Wraith said, but his voice lacked conviction. "It means everything, because now you know we're willing to sacrifice anything to stop you. Our ships, our colonies, our lives. Everything is expendable if it means protecting Earth." Another message arrived, this one from a different sector. A human mining station had self-destructed rather than be captured, taking 2 Dominion boarding craft with it. Then another report and another. Across the front lines, humans were choosing destruction over surrender. "Why?" Wraith asked. "Why throw away lives for a lost cause?" Kane's expression grew serious. "Because it's not lost. Every ship you lose, every soldier you bury, every day you spend fighting us instead of conquering someone else, brings us closer to victory. You see, Commander, you made one critical mistake." "What mistake?" "You assumed that because we're young as a spacefaring species, we're inexperienced at warfare. But humans have been perfecting the art of killing each other for our entire evolutionary history. We know every trick, every strategy, every dirty method of making an enemy pay for victory, and now we have an entire galaxy to practice in." Wraith left the war room that day with a strange feeling in his chest, something he had never experienced in 17 previous campaigns. Later he would recognize it as the first touch of fear. But in that moment, watching the human admiral's confident smile, he simply knew that something fundamental had changed. The war was no longer proceeding according to plan. The morning briefing had become Commander Wraith's least favorite part of each day. 3 months into what should have been a quick campaign, the tactical reports grew more troubling with each passing week. Today's data screen showed the familiar constellation of red markers indicating human resistance, but the pattern was wrong. Instead of retreating toward their core worlds, the humans seemed to be spreading out, creating pockets of organized defense in the most unlikely places. Lieutenant Marn, Wraith's intelligence officer, gestured toward the primary display with obvious frustration. "Sir, we're seeing coordinated activity in 7 different systems simultaneously. The humans appear to be abandoning traditional military doctrine entirely." Wraith studied the tactical overview while sipping his morning nutrition supplement. The liquid tasted bitter today, though he suspected that had more to do with his mood than the ration's quality. "Explain." "Instead of massing their remaining fleet assets for a decisive engagement, they've broken into smaller units. Scout reports indicate they're using converted civilian vessels as attack craft, mining equipment as weapons, and commercial shipping lanes as ambush points." The door to the briefing room opened, and 2 guards escorted Admiral Kane inside. The human prisoner had become a regular fixture at these morning sessions, ostensibly for interrogation, but increasingly because Wraith found himself genuinely curious about human tactical thinking. Kane's wounds had healed during his 3 months in captivity, and he moved with the confident stride of a man who felt entirely at ease despite his circumstances. "Admiral," Wraith acknowledged, "please join us. Perhaps you can explain your people's apparent abandonment of military logic." Kane took the offered seat and glanced at the tactical display. "What specifically concerns you, Commander?" "This." Wraith highlighted a series of incidents from the previous week. "Your forces attacked a Dominion supply convoy using mining shuttles loaded with industrial explosives. The attack succeeded, but every human vessel was destroyed in the process. No survivors, no captured equipment, no strategic advantage gained." "I see the problem," Kane said thoughtfully. "You're measuring success the wrong way." Lieutenant Marn bristled at the suggestion. "Explain how the total destruction of your own forces constitutes success." Kane stood and walked to the display, moving with the casual confidence of someone giving a lecture, rather than a prisoner under interrogation. "Tell me, Lieutenant, how many ships were in that convoy?" 12 cargo vessels, 4 escort cruisers. "And how many are still operational?" 3 cargo vessels, 1 escort cruiser. "But the human losses were total," Kane interrupted. "Yes, I understand. 6 mining shuttles destroyed, 43 human lives lost. But you're missing the larger picture. Wraith leaned forward. What larger picture? Kane pointed to the supply route marked on the tactical display. This convoy was carrying quantum resonators for your shield generators, correct? Components that take approximately 6 months to manufacture and cannot be produced in forward areas. Wraith nodded reluctantly. Kane's intelligence was disturbingly accurate for a prisoner. So now you have 3 cargo ships carrying useless equipment, because without a complete set of resonators, the shield generators won't function. Meanwhile, your forces in the Kepler sector are operating at reduced defensive capability because their supply shipment was delayed by 3 months. Lieutenant Marn's skin flushed the pale blue that indicated confusion among the Vorth. But your people gained nothing. The attack gained no territory, captured no resources. It gained time, Kane replied. Every day your advance is delayed. Every ship tied up with convoy escort duty. Every resource diverted to protecting supply lines is a day closer to our ultimate victory. Wraith felt that uncomfortable sensation again, the one that had been growing stronger with each passing week. You speak as if defeat is impossible. Kane returned to his seat with a slight smile. Commander, may I ask about your previous campaigns? The 17 civilizations your people conquered. What about them? How long did each conquest take? Wraith consulted his personal records. The longest was 11 months. The shortest 6 weeks. And in each case you faced conventional resistance? Fleet engagements, territorial defense, negotiated surrender? Of course. That is how civilized species conduct warfare. Kane laughed, a sound that held no warmth. Civilized. Yes, I suppose that's one word for it. Tell me about the Zelani campaign. Despite himself, Wraith found his interest piqued. What do you know about the Zelani? Peaceful species, excellent engineers, primarily focused on scientific research. When you arrived in their home system, they assembled their entire fleet for a single decisive battle. They fought bravely but were outmatched. After their defeat, their government saw the futility of continued resistance and negotiated terms. Exactly. And the Korthak? Similar outcome. One major engagement followed by conditional surrender. Kane nodded. Every species you've conquered has followed the same pattern. They viewed war as a problem to be solved through decisive action. Mass your forces, fight your battle, accept the outcome. Very logical, very efficient. Very sensible, Lieutenant Marn added. Very stupid, Kane countered, because they were trying to fight your kind of war instead of their own. Wraith's communication device chimed with an incoming priority message. He glanced at the screen and felt his stomach tighten. Another supply convoy had been attacked, this time in the Centauri region. The method was identical. Human civilian craft loaded with explosives, total destruction of the attacking force, significant damage to Dominion logistics. How did you coordinate this? Wraith demanded, showing Kane the message. I didn't. I've been in your custody for 3 months, remember? Then how? Kane's expression grew serious. Commander, you're thinking like a Vorth. You believe warfare requires central command, coordinated strategy, unified leadership. But humans learned long ago that the most effective resistance movements are cellular. Small groups acting independently, united only by common purpose. That's chaos, not strategy. That's evolution. You see, every species you've conquered before has been trying to win a war. But we're not trying to win. We're trying not to lose. And those are very different objectives. Lieutenant Marn looked confused. What is the difference? When you're trying to win, you mass your forces for decisive action. When you're trying not to lose, you make victory so expensive that your enemy abandons the effort. Kane gestured toward the tactical display. Every convoy we attack costs you more than it costs us. Every day you spend securing supply lines is a day you're not advancing toward Earth. Every ship diverted to escort duty is a ship that can't be used for conquest. Another message arrived, this one reporting a coordinated uprising on a supposedly pacified human colony. The local Dominion garrison was requesting immediate reinforcement. Wraith stared at the accumulating reports with growing unease. Your people cannot sustain these losses indefinitely. Can't we? Kane's smile returned. Commander, how many humans do you think there are? Intelligence estimates place your total population at approximately 4 billion. Close, and how many Vorth? Wraith hesitated. Population figures were classified military information, but Kane's question seemed innocent enough. 800 million, so we outnumber you 5 to 1. Our industrial capacity is distributed across 47 worlds. while yours is concentrated in 12 core systems. We have been preparing for interstellar warfare for 50 years, while you've been enjoying the fruits of easy conquests. Kane leaned back in his chair. Tell me, Commander, who do you think can better afford a long, grinding conflict? The question hung in the air like a physical weight. Wraith found himself staring at the tactical display with new eyes, seeing not a map of human resistance but a glimpse of something much more dangerous. For the first time since the campaign began, he wondered if the War Council's projections might have been wrong. Kane seemed to sense his thoughts. The beautiful thing about fighting for survival is that it clarifies your priorities. Your people are fighting for conquest, for glory, for expansion. My people are fighting for the right to exist. Guess which motivation tends to be stronger? That night, Wraith filed his first request for additional resources. The campaign was taking longer than expected, he explained. Human resistance was proving more organized than initial intelligence had suggested. He needed more ships, more soldiers, more supplies. He did not mention the growing certainty that the humans were teaching him something about warfare that the Vorth had never had to learn. Something that made all their previous victories seem hollow and meaningless. Something that felt suspiciously like desperation. The medical bay reeked of disinfectant and something else that Commander Wraith preferred not to identify. He walked between the rows of wounded Vorth soldiers, noting the glazed expressions and trembling hands that had become increasingly common among troops returning from human-occupied territories. The casualties were mounting, not just in numbers but in the quality of soldiers coming back from the front lines. Dr. Yar looked up from her patient files with undisguised concern. Commander, we need to discuss the psychological evaluations. Wraith had been dreading this conversation for weeks. How bad is it? 30% of returning soldiers are showing signs of severe stress disorder. They report nightmares, inability to concentrate, paranoid behavior. Some refuse to enter confined spaces because they fear human sabotage. Others have requested reassignment to non-combat duties. And the medical casualties? Dr. Yar's expression darkened. Unusual. The humans have developed new tactics that our medical protocols weren't designed to handle. Improvised weapons, booby traps, biological hazards. Yesterday, we had 3 soldiers brought in with injuries from what appears to be a farming tool converted into an explosive device. Wraith felt a familiar knot of tension in his stomach. 6 months into the campaign, nothing was proceeding according to the War Council's projections. Human resistance had not collapsed after the loss of their outer colonies. Instead, it had intensified, evolved, become something entirely outside the parameters of conventional warfare. He made his way to the intelligence center, where Lieutenant Marn was analyzing the latest batch of reconnaissance reports. The displays showed a web of human activity that defied easy categorization. Where the Vorth expected military installations, they found agricultural centers. Where they anticipated weak points, they discovered heavily fortified positions. Where they assumed they had achieved pacification, new resistance cells emerged overnight. Report, Wraith ordered. Lieutenant Marn activated the primary tactical display. Sir, the situation continues to deteriorate. The humans have abandoned all pretense of conventional military organization. Our analysts have identified at least 47 distinct resistance groups operating independently across 12 star systems. 47? Wraith stared at the display. How is that possible? They appear to be operating without central coordination. Each group develops its own tactics, targets, and methods. When we adapt our defenses to counter one group's approach, another group tries a completely different strategy. The door slid open, and Admiral Kane entered, escorted by his usual pair of guards. Over the months of his captivity, Kane had become something approaching a consultant rather than a prisoner. Wraith found himself relying on the humans' insights to understand what was happening on the front lines. Admiral, Wraith acknowledged, perhaps you can explain why your people seem incapable of organizing a coherent military response. Kane examined the tactical display with obvious interest. Oh, but we are organized, Commander. Just not in the way you're used to seeing. This is chaos, Lieutenant Marn protested. No unified command structure, no coordinated strategy, no clear objectives. No single point of failure, Kane replied. That's the beauty of distributed resistance. You can't cut off the head because there is no head. You can't predict our next move because we don't have a master plan. Wraith highlighted a series of attacks from the previous week. Your people destroyed a medical facility on Proxima Station. Dozens of wounded soldiers were killed. How does that serve any strategic purpose? Kane's expression sobered. It doesn't, but it serves a tactical one. Every facility you have to guard, every installation you have to protect, every supply line you have to secure draws resources away from your advance toward Earth. That's not warfare. It's terrorism. Commander, Kane said quietly. Do you know what your forces did to the civilian population on New Boston? Wraith shifted uncomfortably. The orbital bombardment of New Boston had been thorough and efficient, designed to eliminate any potential for organized resistance. The fact that it had also eliminated the colony's entire civilian population was an unfortunate but necessary consequence. Acceptable casualties of war, Wraith replied, using the same phrase he had used months earlier. 200,000 people, including 30,000 children. Kane's voice remained calm, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. So when you talk to me about terrorism, remember that we learned it from watching you. Lieutenant Marn pulled up another set of reports. The economic impact is becoming severe. This campaign has already consumed twice the allocated budget, and we're nowhere near completion. The War Council is demanding explanations. Wraith knew the numbers all too well. Every human world required extensive bombardment before ground forces could operate safely. Every supply convoy needed heavy escort. Every occupied territory demanded permanent garrison forces to prevent uprisings. The mathematics of conquest, which had worked perfectly for 17 previous campaigns, was falling apart against human resistance. Show him the industrial reports, Kane suggested. Wraith frowned. Why would you want us to see those? Because you're going to figure it out eventually, and I'd rather you understand what you're really fighting. Lieutenant Marn hesitated, then activated a new display showing human industrial capacity across occupied territories. The data was troubling. Despite months of bombardment and occupation, human manufacturing output had barely decreased. If anything, it seemed to be increasing in some sectors. How is this possible? Wraith demanded. Kane walked to the display and pointed to several data points. Underground factories, mobile production facilities, distributed manufacturing. When you destroyed our major industrial centers, we adapted. Every farm, every mine, every research station became a potential weapons factory. That's impossible. You lack the infrastructure for distributed manufacturing. We lacked the infrastructure for centralized manufacturing too, until we built it. The difference is that distributed systems are much harder to destroy. A new alert chimed on the communications console. Wraith read the message with growing alarm. A human strike force had penetrated the outer defenses of a Dominion supply depot and made off with several tons of quantum processing components. The attack had been carried out using modified civilian transports and what appeared to be improvised stealth technology. Stealth technology? Wraith looked at Kane. Your people don't have stealth capabilities. We do now. Amazing what you can accomplish when you're analyzing captured Dominion equipment instead of trying to build everything from scratch. Lieutenant Marn's skin flushed pale blue. You're reverse engineering our technology? Among other things. Your quantum shields work on a specific frequency modulation, did you know that? Very elegant design. Nearly impossible to penetrate with conventional weapons, but if you understand the underlying physics, you can build jammers that disrupt the modulation cycle. Wraith felt the blood drain from his face. If the humans had found a way to counter Dominion shields, the entire strategic balance of the war would shift. That's impossible. Our quantum technology is centuries ahead of yours. Your quantum technology is centuries older than ours, Kane corrected, which means it's had time to become standardized, predictable, vulnerable to systematic analysis. Our technology is newer, cruder, but it's also more flexible. The communication console chimed again. This time it was a priority alert from Fleet Command. 3 Dominion cruisers had been ambushed in the Tau Ceti system by human forces using previously unknown weapon configurations. 2 ships had been disabled, 1 destroyed. The survivors reported that human vessels had demonstrated capabilities that should have been impossible with their level of technology. Wraith stared at the message, feeling something cold settle in his chest. What have you done? Kane's smile held no warmth. We've been studying, Commander. Every piece of wreckage from our destroyed ships, every fragment of Dominion technology we can recover, every tactical report from our surviving crews. 6 months of intensive analysis, and we're starting to understand how your people think about warfare. And you fight like generals. We fight like engineers. You rely on superior technology and overwhelming force. We adapt, improvise, evolve. You follow doctrine and establish tactics. We make it up as we go along." Kane paused, his expression growing serious. "The question is, Commander, which approach do you think works better in a long war?" That night, Wraith sent his third request for additional resources to the War Council. This time he didn't try to minimize the severity of the situation. The humans were not behaving like any previously encountered species. Their resistance was intensifying rather than weakening. Their technological capabilities were advancing at an unprecedented rate. Most troubling of all, they seemed to be learning faster than the Dominion forces could adapt. Every new tactic the Vorth developed was countered within weeks. Every technological advantage was neutralized or turned against them. For the first time in his military career, Commander Wraith began to consider the possibility that he might be on the losing side of a war. The thought was so alien to his experience that he could barely acknowledge it, even to himself. But the numbers didn't lie. And neither, he was beginning to suspect, did Admiral Kane. The strategic map flickered with red warning indicators as Commander Wraith reviewed the morning intelligence briefing. 9 months into what the War Council had promised would be a 4-month campaign, the tactical situation had become a nightmare of complexity. Human forces were no longer simply resisting the Dominion advance. They were actively hunting Vorth military assets across multiple star systems. Fleet Captain Voss materialized on the communication screen, his usually composed features showing signs of strain. "Commander, we've lost contact with the reconnaissance squadron in the Kepler system. Last transmission indicated they were investigating what appeared to be an abandoned human logistics station." Wraith felt his chest tighten. Over the past month, the Dominion had lost 6 ships under similar circumstances. Each time the pattern was identical: routine patrol or investigation mission, contact with apparent human civilian infrastructure, followed by silence. Recovery missions found only debris and radiation signatures that defied easy analysis. Any wreckage recovery? Minimal. The destruction appears to have been comprehensive. Admiral Kane looked up from the intelligence reports he had been studying with what Wraith had come to recognize as professional interest. "May I see the tactical data on that Kepler station?" Wraith hesitated. Sharing operational intelligence with a prisoner violated protocol. But Kane's insights had proven valuable in understanding human tactical evolution. "Lieutenant Marn, display the reconnaissance scans." The holographic display showed a standard human industrial complex orbiting Kepler's 4th planet. According to sensor readings, the facility appeared abandoned, with minimal power signatures and no detectable life signs. It should have been a routine investigation target. Kane studied the display with obvious fascination. Impressive? Very impressive. What's impressive about an abandoned station? The fact that you can't see what it really is. Kane pointed to several structural elements on the display. "Those aren't docking arms, they're launch tubes. That's not a communications array, it's a targeting system. And those power readings you're detecting? They're not minimal. They're shielded." Lieutenant Marn's skin flushed the pale blue of confusion. "Are you suggesting the station was a military installation?" "I'm suggesting it was a trap, specifically designed to look like exactly the kind of target your reconnaissance protocols would investigate." Kane turned to Wraith with something approaching admiration. "Tell me, Commander, how many similar installations have your forces investigated over the past month?" Wraith consulted his operational logs. 14. All appeared to be abandoned civilian infrastructure. "And how many resulted in contact with human forces?" The question hit Wraith like a physical blow. "All of them." Kane nodded with grim satisfaction. "Your people have been hunting specific targets for so long that you've forgotten what it feels like to be prey. But humans remember. We've been both predator and prey for our entire evolutionary history." The communication console chimed with an urgent priority alert. Wraith activated the display to find Admiral Kess, commanding officer of the 8th Fleet, staring back at him with barely controlled panic. "Commander, we have a situation. The entire human colony in the Vega system has vanished." "Vanished?" "Explain. 3 days ago, our long-range sensors detected normal activity on Vega Prime. Population centers, industrial facilities, orbital traffic. This morning, we arrived to find the planet completely empty. No life signs, no power signatures, no trace of the 2 million humans who were living there. Kane leaned forward with obvious interest. Any signs of bombardment? Invasion? Mass evacuation? Admiral Kess shook his head. Nothing. The infrastructure is intact, but it's like the entire population simply disappeared overnight. Wraith stared at the display, feeling a cold weight settle in his stomach. Where did they go? That's what concerns me, Kane replied quietly. 2 million people don't just vanish. They relocate. And if they relocated without your sensors detecting the movement, that would require stealth capabilities far beyond what your people possess, Lieutenant Marn protested. Kane's smile was cold. Would it? Or would it require understanding Dominion sensor technology well enough to avoid detection? The implications hit Wraith like a cascade failure. If humans could move entire populations without detection, they could also move military assets, industrial equipment, weapons, stockpiles. The strategic balance wasn't just shifting. It had already shifted, and the Dominion forces hadn't even realized it. Another alert sounded, this one from the Frontier Patrol. 3 more Dominion vessels had gone missing while investigating apparently abandoned human installations. The pattern was accelerating. Kane studied the accumulating reports with professional appreciation. You're facing a different kind of enemy now, Commander. For the first 6 months of this war, my people were reacting to your actions, defending, adapting, surviving. But reaction time eventually becomes negative. What do you mean? We're not responding to your moves anymore. We're anticipating them. As if to punctuate Kane's words, the tactical display lit up with new alerts. Human forces had simultaneously struck at supply convoys in 4 different systems. The attack showed unprecedented coordination and timing, suggesting a level of communication and planning that should have been impossible without detectable infrastructure. How? Wraith demanded. Our intelligence indicates your command and control networks were destroyed months ago. Kane stood and walked to the tactical display, moving with the confidence of someone giving a lecture. Traditional command and control networks, yes. But humans have been developing what you might call organic coordination for thousands of years. Swarm intelligence, distributed decision-making, emergent strategy. That's not how warfare works. That's not how your warfare works. But consider this. A flock of birds can coordinate complex aerial maneuvers involving thousands of individuals without any central command structure. Each bird follows simple rules based on local conditions, but the overall behavior appears planned and purposeful. Lieutenant Marn looked skeptical. You're comparing human military strategy to animal behavior? I'm comparing human military strategy to human evolution. We're social creatures, Commander Wraith. We've survived as a species by developing incredibly sophisticated methods of group coordination that don't require centralized control. The communication console erupted with multiple priority alerts. Human forces had appeared seemingly from nowhere to attack Dominion installations across 7 star systems simultaneously. The attack showed tactical knowledge that suggested detailed intelligence about Vorth military procedures and weaknesses. Impossible, Wraith breathed, staring at the display. Our security protocols were designed to prevent infiltration by species that think like you do, Kane interrupted. Hierarchical, disciplined, protocol-driven. But humans don't infiltrate in the traditional sense. We observe, we adapt, we learn. Admiral Kess appeared on the communication screen again, his composure completely shattered. Commander, we need immediate reinforcement. Human forces have disabled our shield generators using some kind of focused electromagnetic pulse. They're boarding the station. How many attackers? Unknown. They're using some kind of jamming technology that interferes with our sensors. But Commander, Kess's voice dropped to a whisper. They're not fighting like the humans we encountered before. They're coordinated, professional, equipped with technology that matches our own capabilities. The transmission cut to static. Wraith turned to Kane with growing desperation. What has happened to your people? Kane's expression was serious now, all traces of his earlier humor gone. They've stopped being victims, Commander. For 9 months, you've been teaching them how to fight a war against the Dominion. Every tactic you've used, every technology you've deployed, every strategic decision you've made has been a lesson in how to defeat you. That's impossible. Military expertise takes generations to develop. For most species, yes, but humans have a unique advantage. We learn from our mistakes very quickly because historically failing to learn meant extinction. Kane paused, studying Wraith's expression. Tell me, Commander, in all your previous conquests, did any species ever improve their capabilities during the war itself? Wraith considered the question and realized the answer was no. Every previous campaign had followed the same pattern. Initial resistance using existing capabilities, gradual degradation as those capabilities proved insufficient, eventual surrender when the futility became apparent. None of them had time to adapt, he said slowly. Exactly. You conquered them too quickly. But this war has given my people something invaluable. Time to study you, time to understand you, time to become better at warfare than you are. The tactical display now showed human forces operating across 15 different systems, conducting simultaneous operations that would have required months of planning and coordination, yet intelligence indicated that human command structures remained distributed and seemingly improvised. You're not fighting us anymore, Kane continued. We're hunting you. And the beautiful thing about being hunters rather than prey is that we get to choose the time and place of engagement. That night, Wraith sent his first formal request for strategic withdrawal. The campaign had exceeded all projected timelines and resource allocations. Human capabilities were evolving at an unprecedented rate. Continued offensive operations carried unacceptable risk of major fleet losses. He did not mention his growing suspicion that the humans had somehow transformed themselves from victims into something far more dangerous, something that understood Dominion military doctrine better than the Dominion forces themselves, something that had been studying the art of war for far longer than the Vorth had been practicing it. Sleep had become impossible. Commander Wraith lay in his quarters staring at the ceiling, listening to the subtle vibrations of his ship as it moved through hyperspace. Every sound made him tense. Every shift in the engine rhythm triggered memories of human attacks that had come without warning, without logic, without mercy. 2 years into the war that should have ended in 4 months, and he could no longer tell who was hunting whom. The medical reports from Dr. Yar had grown increasingly alarming. Half his crew showed symptoms of severe stress disorder. Soldiers who had conquered 17 civilizations now jumped at shadows and refused to enter rooms without checking for improvised explosives. The proud warriors of the Dominion fleet had been reduced to nervous, paranoid beings who saw human traps in every ordinary situation. But perhaps most troubling of all were the reports from the prisoners. Wraith had interrogated dozens of captured humans over the past year, and their responses defied everything he understood about psychological warfare. Traditional prisoners showed fear, desperation, hope for mercy. Human prisoners showed something else entirely. A calm certainty that made his skin crawl. They spoke about the war as if it were already over, as if the outcome had been decided long ago. They discussed Dominion tactics with clinical detachment, pointing out weaknesses and vulnerabilities with the casual expertise of university professors. Most disturbing of all, they seemed genuinely curious about Vorth psychology, asking questions about Dominion society and culture as if they were conducting research. The communication console chimed softly, breaking Wraith from his troubled thoughts. Lieutenant Marn's voice carried an edge of barely controlled panic. Commander, you need to see this immediately. Wraith made his way to the bridge where his officers clustered around the tactical display with expressions of confusion and fear. The screen showed sensor readings from the outer system perimeter, but the data made no sense. What am I looking at? Wraith asked. Human ships, sir. At least 40 vessels, but... Lieutenant Marn paused, struggling with the implications. They're not showing up on our tactical sensors. We're only detecting them through gravitational distortion analysis. Wraith stared at the display. If humans had developed effective stealth technology, it meant that every sensor reading, every tactical assessment, every strategic decision of the past 2 years had been based on incomplete information. How long have they been out there? Unknown. Could be hours, could be days. The gravitational signatures are subtle enough that we might have missed them entirely if Navigation Officer Plex hadn't noticed the stellar aberration patterns. Admiral, Kane entered the bridge escorted by his usual guards. Over the 2 years of his captivity, he had become something between a prisoner and a consultant, offering insights into human tactics that had proven disturbingly accurate. Today, his expression held something that looked almost like sympathy. Admiral, Wraith acknowledged, perhaps you can explain what your people want. Kane examined the tactical display with obvious interest. 40 ships. That's a significant force commitment. And the fact that you can only detect them through secondary effects suggests they're using our new quantum displacement fields. Quantum displacement? Borrowed from your own technology, actually. Amazing what human engineers can accomplish when they have 2 years to study captured Dominion equipment. Kane turned to study Wraith's expression. The question is, Commander, why are they revealing themselves now? Before Wraith could respond, the communication array activated. A human face appeared on the screen, younger than Kane, with short brown hair and intelligent eyes that held no trace of fear or hostility. She wore what appeared to be a military uniform, though the design was unlike anything in Dominion intelligence files. Commander Wraith, I am General Sarah Mitchell of the Human Defense Command. I'm requesting permission to come aboard your vessel for negotiations. Wraith felt his hands shake slightly. Negotiations? The war is over, Commander. Has been for several months, though I suspect you haven't realized it yet. We'd like to discuss terms for the withdrawal of Dominion forces from human space. Lieutenant Marne's skin flushed the deep blue of shock. Terms? You're in no position to dictate terms. General Mitchell's expression remained politely neutral. With respect, Lieutenant, I think you may have misunderstood the current tactical situation. Admiral Kane, would you mind explaining? Kane walked to the tactical display and began highlighting sensor readings. Commander, look at these gravitational distortions. 40 ships, you said, but notice the mass displacement patterns. These aren't standard human vessels. Wraith studied the data more carefully and felt his blood turn cold. The gravitational signatures were enormous, far larger than any ships in the human fleet according to Dominion intelligence estimates. Dreadnoughts, Kane said quietly, each one approximately 3 times the mass of your flagship, equipped with weapons and defensive systems that incorporate 2 years of intensive study of Dominion technology. Impossible. Your people lack the industrial capacity for capital ship construction. General Mitchell smiled sadly. Commander, we've been in full wartime production for 2 years. Every human world, every orbital facility, every asteroid mining operation has been converted to military manufacturing. Did you really think we were sitting idle while you conquered our outer colonies? The bridge fell silent except for the subtle hum of ship systems. Wraith found himself staring at the tactical display, trying to process the implications of what he was seeing. 40 human dreadnoughts armed with hybrid Dominion human technology, positioned to intercept his fleet. What do you want? He asked finally. Complete withdrawal of Dominion forces from human space within 60 standard days. Reparations for destroyed colonies and civilian casualties. A non-aggression treaty that will be monitored by neutral third parties. And if we refuse? General Mitchell's expression grew serious. Commander, you've been fighting this war with approximately 12% of human military capability. The forces you've encountered, the resistance cells, the improvised attacks, the guerrilla tactics, those were training exercises. We've been learning how to fight you while protecting our real assets. Kane nodded toward the tactical display. The 2 million missing colonists from Vega Prime, they weren't evacuated. They were recruited. Every human world you thought you had pacified has been feeding intelligence, resources, and personnel to our military production effort. Wraith felt reality shift around him like a physical force. You mean, every colony you conquered, every installation you occupied, every human you thought was defeated, they were all working for us. Gathering information, reporting your movements, sabotaging your equipment in ways too subtle to detect immediately. General Mitchell leaned forward slightly. Commander, do you know what a Trojan horse is? Wraith shook his head numbly. Ancient human military strategy. You give your enemy exactly what they think they want, while concealing your real capability until it's too late for them to respond effectively. She paused. You wanted to conquer human space, so we let you. While you were occupying worthless colonial outposts, we were building the largest military force in human history. Lieutenant Marne's voice came out as barely a whisper. How many ships? Currently? About 8,000 combat vessels with production accelerating, but numbers aren't really the point. General Mitchell's expression grew almost compassionate. The point is that you've taught us everything we need to know about Dominion military doctrine. Your tactics, your technology, your psychology. We understand you completely now. Kane walked over to stand beside Wraith. The beautiful irony is that this was inevitable from the moment you decided to fight a long war against humans. We're adaptation specialists, Commander. Given enough time and pressure, we don't just learn to survive, we learn to dominate. Wraith stared at the tactical display, finally understanding the true scope of what had happened. The war hadn't been going badly because of human resistance. The war had been going exactly as the humans planned. Every Dominion victory had been allowed. Every tactical success had been a lesson for human strategists. Every month of occupation had been an opportunity for intelligence gathering and military preparation. "You've been studying us," he said. General Mitchell nodded. "For 2 years. Every communication intercept, every captured piece of equipment, every tactical decision you've made has been analyzed by teams of human specialists. We know how you think, how you fight, how you make decisions under pressure. And now we know how to beat you," Kane added. "Not just tactically, but strategically. We understand the economic pressures that drive Dominion expansion. We know the political structures that support your military campaigns. Most importantly, we understand the psychological weaknesses that make your species vulnerable to prolonged conflict." The communication console chimed with incoming messages from across the Dominion fleet. Ship commanders reporting mechanical failures, navigation errors, supply shortages. Problems that had seemed like normal wear and tear from a long campaign now revealed themselves as systematic sabotage. "How long?" Wraith asked. "The sabotage? About 18 months. Nothing dramatic, just gradual degradation of critical systems. By our calculations, approximately 60% of your fleet is operating at reduced capacity due to accumulated damage you're not even aware of." General Mitchell stood. "Commander, we're not your enemies. We're simply a species that refuses to be conquered. The terms I've offered are generous considering the circumstances. I strongly recommend you accept them." Wraith looked around his bridge at the faces of officers who had served with him through 17 successful campaigns. Today, for the first time, he saw fear in their eyes, not the healthy caution of experienced warriors, but the deep existential terror of beings who had finally encountered something beyond their understanding. "I need to consult with Fleet Command," he said. "Of course. But Commander?" General Mitchell's voice carried a note of finality. "This is the only offer you're going to receive. The alternative is the complete destruction of every Dominion military asset in human space." As the communication ended and the human fleet faded back into invisible stealth, Wraith realized that the war had ended months ago. He just hadn't been informed of his defeat. The War Council chamber fell silent as Commander Wraith finished his report. 3 years, 7 months, and 16 days after the campaign began, he stood before the assembled leadership of the Dominion, explaining how the most technologically primitive species they had ever encountered had achieved total strategic victory. Supreme Admiral Korv, architect of 17 successful campaigns, stared at the tactical displays showing the complete withdrawal of Dominion forces from human space. His ancient features bore the weight of a defeat that no one in the chamber had thought possible. "Explain again how we lost contact with Admiral Kane," Supreme Admiral Korv said, his voice carrying the dangerous quiet of barely controlled rage. Wraith felt sweat beading on his forehead despite the chamber's cool temperature. "Sir, it appears that Admiral Kane was never actually a prisoner. Our analysis suggests he was deliberately captured to observe Dominion tactical doctrine from within our command structure. You're telling me that for nearly 4 years, we had a human intelligence operative sitting in our strategy meetings?" "Yes, sir. Every tactical discussion, every strategic decision, every operational detail was transmitted back to human command through methods our security protocols never detected." General Vex, the Dominion's chief military strategist, leaned forward with obvious disbelief. "That's impossible. Our counterintelligence measures are designed to detect any form of unauthorized communication." Wraith activated a holographic display, showing Kane's prison cell aboard his flagship. The humans weren't using electronic communication. They were using what they call biological data storage. Admiral Kane memorized everything: troop movements, supply routes, tactical doctrines, psychological profiles of our command staff. When he was eventually exchanged for Dominion prisoners, he carried 4 years of intelligence data in his memory. Supreme Admiral Korv's skin flushed the deep purple of extreme anger. "Are you suggesting that one human prisoner was able to compromise our entire military campaign?" "Not compromise, sir. Study. The humans weren't trying to stop us through prisoner intelligence. They were learning how we think, how we make decisions, how we conduct warfare. Every conversation I had with Kane was a lesson in Dominion military psychology." The chamber erupted in angry voices as the implications sank in. The proud warriors of the Dominion had been subjects in a human research project, unknowingly teaching their enemies everything needed to achieve victory. General Vex called for silence. Even granted this intelligence advantage, the humans lacked the industrial capacity to threaten Dominion forces. Our technological superiority should have been decisive. Wraith activated another display, this one showing comparative industrial output over the 4-year campaign. Sir, that assumption proved incorrect. While we were conquering their outer colonies, the humans were converting their core worlds into the largest military-industrial complex in known galactic history. The numbers on the display told a story that made several council members gasp in shock. Human ship production had increased by 8,000% during the war. Their manufacturing capacity now exceeded that of the entire Dominion by a factor of 3. How is that possible? Total war economy, sir. Every human world, every space station, every asteroid mining facility was converted to military production. They mobilized their entire civilization for warfare in a way we've never encountered before. Supreme Admiral Korv studied the production figures with growing alarm. What about the colonies we occupied? Surely they couldn't maintain this level of production while fighting a defensive war. Wraith felt his throat tighten. This was the part of his report that he had dreaded most. Sir, our occupation of human colonies was ineffective. The humans employed what they call cellular resistance. Every colonist we thought we had pacified was actually feeding intelligence to human military command. That's impossible. We had security protocols, which were designed to detect conventional espionage. The humans didn't use electronic surveillance or formal intelligence networks. Every farmer, every technician, every civilian administrator was an intelligence asset. They reported our movements, sabotaged our equipment, and coordinated resistance activities through methods that appeared to be normal social interaction. General Vex activated his personal communicator and began reviewing classified intelligence files. According to our records, human resistance activity was minimal in occupied territories. Because they wanted us to think that, sir. Every act of sabotage was designed to look like equipment failure. Every intelligence leak appeared to be operational security breach. Every tactical surprise seemed like coincidence. We never realized we were fighting the entire human species, not just their military forces. The War Council fell silent as they processed the scope of their miscalculation. They had assumed they were fighting a conventional war against a primitive species. Instead, they had been subjects in a comprehensive study of Dominion military capabilities conducted by a civilization that had been preparing for interstellar warfare for over 2 centuries. Supreme Admiral Korv finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. The peace terms. Complete withdrawal from human space within 60 standard days. Reparations for civilian casualties. A non-aggression treaty with neutral monitoring. And Wraith paused, knowing that the final term would be the most difficult to accept. Immediate cessation of all Dominion expansion activities for a period of 50 years. The chamber erupted in outraged voices. The Dominion had built its entire economy on expansion and conquest. A 50-year moratorium would effectively end their civilization as they knew it. Unacceptable, General Vex declared. We'll resume the campaign with fresh resources. The humans cannot have unlimited military capacity. Wraith activated one final display, showing current human fleet dispositions. Sir, intelligence estimates suggest they currently possess approximately 12,000 combat vessels, with production continuing to accelerate. More importantly, these ships incorporate 4 years of captured Dominion technology combined with human engineering innovations. What kind of innovations? They've solved several technical problems that our engineers have been working on for decades. Their quantum displacement fields are more efficient than ours. Their fusion reactors produce 30% more power. Their weapon systems have demonstrated the ability to penetrate Dominion shields through what appears to be harmonic frequency manipulation. Supreme Admiral Korv stared at the tactical displays with the expression of someone watching his worldview collapse. How did they advance so quickly? Because they had to, sir. When you're fighting for survival against a technologically superior enemy, innovation isn't optional, it's mandatory. The humans compressed decades of military technological development into 4 years of total war. General Vex looked up from his intelligence files with obvious confusion. According to this data, human casualties during the war were minimal. How did they maintain civilian morale while converting their entire civilization to military production? Wraith felt something cold settle in his chest. Sir, I don't think they saw it as a sacrifice. I think they saw it as evolution. Explain. The humans have been fighting wars for their entire evolutionary history. Not just military conflicts, but existential struggles against climate, disease, resource scarcity, predators. For them, warfare isn't an aberration, it's a fundamental aspect of existence. When we attacked them, we didn't just threaten their colonies. We gave their entire species a purpose that unified every human world. The War Council sat in stunned silence as they realized the full implications of their mistake. They had assumed that humans, like every other species the Dominion had conquered, would view war as a temporary disruption to normal life. Instead, the humans had embraced warfare as an opportunity for species-wide advancement. Supreme Admiral Korv finally stood, his movements showing every one of his advanced years. The terms will be accepted. Begin immediate preparations for full withdrawal from human space. Sir, General Vex protested, surely we can negotiate more favorable. General, the Supreme Admiral interrupted, read the intelligence reports. The humans aren't negotiating from a position of strength. They're negotiating from a position of absolute dominance. The terms they've offered are generous, considering that they could simply destroy every Dominion ship in their space. Wraith nodded grimly. Sir, General Mitchell made it clear that this is the only offer we'll receive. The alternative is the complete annihilation of Dominion forces. And you believe they have that capability? Sir, I believe they've had that capability for over a year. The fact that they're offering terms, instead of demanding unconditional surrender, suggests they're more interested in ending the war than in destroying us. Supreme Admiral Korv walked to the great viewing window that looked out over the Dominion's capital world. So we have encountered a species that fights more effectively than we do. Not more effectively, sir. Differently. They don't fight to conquer territory or acquire resources. They fight to ensure their species survives and thrives, and they're willing to sacrifice everything else to achieve that goal. Even their own lives. Especially their own lives. That's what made them so dangerous. Every human who died in this war was seen not as a loss, but as an investment in their species' future. They weren't fighting to preserve what they had. They were fighting to become what they needed to be. The War Council chamber fell quiet as the assembled leaders contemplated the end of their expansion era. After 1,000 years of easy conquests, they had finally encountered a species that viewed warfare not as politics by other means, but as evolution in action. Supreme Admiral Korv turned back to face the Council. Prepare the withdrawal orders and contact the Ministry of Technology. We need to begin studying human innovations immediately. Sir, if we can't conquer them, perhaps we can learn from them. The humans have just demonstrated capabilities that took us centuries to develop. They accomplished it in 4 years under the pressure of existential threat. Wraith felt a strange mixture of defeat and admiration as he realized what the Supreme Admiral was suggesting. You want to adopt human military doctrine? I want to understand how they think. Because if we encounter another species like them, we need to be prepared for a very different kind of war. As the War Council dissolved and the great machinery of Dominion withdrawal began, Commander Wraith found himself thinking about Admiral Kane's parting words. You thought you knew fear, but you only understood dominance. Fear is what you feel when the prey becomes the predator. The humans had taught the Dominion something that 1,000 years of easy victories had never revealed. That the most dangerous enemy is not the one with superior technology, but the one with superior motivation, and in that lesson lay the seeds of a new understanding of what warfare truly meant among the stars. The age of Dominion expansion was over. The age of human influence had begun.